Welcome to lecture number 8 of Linguistics 2 English 504. Now, before we talk about the anthropological linguistics, which is in fact today's a part of today's lecture, let's look at what we did in the last lecture. Now, let's look at the review. This review for lecture number 7. We talked about applied linguistics, and we saw that applied linguistics uses knowledge of how languages work within different applied settings. So we discussed about the applied aspect or the practical aspect of linguistics, and we saw that it examines the structure of language and its role in communication. It explores how children acquire language. It studies how second language learners develop skills. So we talked about the children's ability to learn language. We talked about the second language learners' ability to develop skills. And we saw the role of applied linguistics in these fields. We further talked about the practical application of language, the use of applied linguistics in language teaching, language learning, psychology, neurosurgery, communication media, law, philosophy, mathematics, sociology. All these fields, we saw that linguistics plays a very dominant role, and it has extended its knowledge to all these fields, providing its expertise, providing the rules, providing the useful help to where the problems occur. We also saw that that linguistics is a study for personal satisfaction. Now, we concluded the lecture by saying that linguistics can be studied for its own sake, for personal satisfaction, or to quench the thirst of knowing what the language is about. And we concluded by looking at the usefulness, or looking at the utility, or the significance of linguistics in several fields. Now, in this lecture today, we'll talk about some more branches where linguistics is playing a very dominant role. Now, let's look at anthropological linguistics. Let's look at a definition. The evolution of language in human society and its role in the formation of culture is studied in anthropological linguistics. So we'll be dealing with human society again, and we'll be dealing with the formation of culture. What is the behavior of human beings? What is the role of linguistics in formation of a culture? How cultures develop, how cultures change, how you can identify cultures through the language being used in those cultures, and how you find different features of cultures being changed because of language. Now, this is another aspect of language, society and culture. Anthropological linguistics basically talks about a different aspect now. Now we are talking not only about society, but we are also talking about the culture. The structure of language has a social and cultural basis in the same way as other customs, conventions, and codes, such as those related to dress and food. So, structure of language, it has a social and cultural basis. Social societies and cultures, they have a role to play in the structure of language. The structure of language affects societies and cultures, and on the other hand, the societies and cultures, they also have an impact on the structure of language. So you can study a society, you can know the features of society by studying the language of that society and culture, and on the other hand, you can also study the language by looking at the different features of that culture. We can also look at the conventions. We can look at things like dress and food. Now, these are very common things. These are things of everyday use, and sometimes the dress or the food or the language being used in the traditional in the ceremonies, that can really help us to study the language, or the very language used there, that can also give an insight into the cultures, different cultures of those areas. Now, each culture organizes its world in its own way, giving names to objects, identifying areas of significance or values, and suppressing other areas. Now, when the cultures form up, when the cultures are developing, when the cultures are in the process of forming, they are giving names. People living in those cultures, they are giving names to different objects. They are identifying areas of significance and values. They are identifying different objects. They are identifying different areas, different important areas, different values, and then they are assigning words to those areas. They are deciding about, making decisions about the language to be used for those objects or for those occasions or for those different features of the culture. So it's basically not only the language that is affecting the culture, but when the cultures are in the process of forming, they are also assigning, they are also changing the language, they are also in the process of taking new words, they are in the process of coining new words, and then gradually these words, they become associated with those cultures. They become a part of those cultures. Each culture organizes words its own way. Now, every culture, of course, has different words, has different varieties of language. So you can study the culture with the help of these words, and you can, on the other hand, you can also study the words or study the variety of language through the study of culture. Language becomes a way of embodying the worldview and beliefs of a culture and the things that the culture holds sacred. So language becomes a way of embodying the worldview. Language, you can look into the beliefs of those cultures or different cultures through the study of language. Different cultures, they hold some of their beliefs very sacred, some of the things very sacred, some of the places very sacred, and they have their names for that. They hold some of the words very sacred to them. They devise words for different objects. They devise words for different occasions, and they think that these words are holy words. They would even assign them very sacred place. So we study basically the viewpoint of that culture through language. A culture with family relationship. Now here we have an example, a very common example, that a culture with family relationships, most significant, will have many kinship terms. Like in the East, we have the family values are very strong. And here you have different words for the relationships. Like each relationship will have a particular term. Like, for example, you can compare the kinship terms in English with those in Urdu. For example, grandfather, grandmother, uncle, aunt. Now here you have two different words. In Urdu, you have two different words for a paternal grandfather and a maternal grandfather. Whereas in English, you have just one word, grandfather, and then they would put another word, paternal or maternal, with that. But when you talk about the same relations, in Urdu, you have Nana and Dada. You have Mamu and Chacha, right? So these words, they are two different words. And because, now here we can see that family relationships they are so strong. The values are so strong in the East. The values are so strong in our culture that that we find so many different words for the same things, so many different words for the same relations. So here one feature of our culture comes up, that through the study of language, one feature of our culture comes up, that the family relationships or the family values are very strong, and that has created an impact on the language, and more words have been coined just because they hold these relationships very sacred, very dear to themselves, very dear to themselves. So now we have similar terms for colors again. Similarly, terms for colors, look at emotions, natural phenomena, and so on, are differently organized in every culture and reveal a lot about that culture. You have so many different colors, you have shades of colors, and where the colors are given importance in some cultures, where in some of the professions the colors are given so much importance, and this also can be related with the literature. Now, the literary writers and the poets, they are using colors in their poetry. And here you have so many words, they have coined so many words for the different shades of colors. Similarly, where the colors are not given that importance, you have just one color like yellow, blue, red. But here, in some of the, when you go to the field of poetry, or when you go to such a culture where there is a lot of work going on in the field of literature, you find so many words for different shades of yellow, and so many words for different shades of green. So likewise, even the natural phenomena. For the natural phenomena, again, you have so many words in different cultures. Like in Urdu, you have so many words for the natural phenomena going on in this universe. Just because it's being studied, it's being closely observed, and people are taking they take a lot of interest in natural phenomena, just because the religious element is very strong here, and we believe that all the natural phenomena which are going on in this universe are from God or from Allah. So we are studying them very closely, and we have so many different, because of close observation, and because we are strong beliefs in that, we have coined so many different words for natural phenomena. So all these words, they reveal a lot about culture. They tell us about the culture, about the beliefs of the culture, about the thoughts of the culture, about the, you have so many words for the emotions. You have you talk about the emotions of a certain people, certain group of people living in a certain culture. So you can even say that people living in a culture are naturally very emotional, or naturally very sentimental. So even the language that gives us a picture about the emotions, the sentiments of people, the feelings of the people, the thoughts of the people, and how they closely observe all these things, and what things they hold important and what things they hold sacred. Now, the study of these cultural elements is called basically ethnography. Now, we have a term for that. When you are studying the cultural elements, the study that is been assigned, the term that has been assigned to this study is ethnography of a culture. So when you are studying only the cultural elements, you can say that you are doing a study which has been given name ethnography. Now, a specific way of communication in a culture is studied as the ethnography of communication. Every culture has a specific way of communication. Every culture has a specific variety of language, a specific way to talk about many things going around. So when you are studying the variety, or when you are studying the kind of language being used in the communication style, you can say that you are basically studying the ethnography of a communication. What is the impact of culture on communication, and how is communication, what type of communication is being what type of words or what type of communication you can see in fashion because of certain features of culture. Now, anthropological studies have explored the relation between language and culture. Broadly speaking, we can say that anthropological studies, they talk about the relationship between language and culture. What is the relationship of language on culture, and what is the relationship of culture on language? How the language is changing, how the language is developing because of culture, and the features of the culture, or the people living in that culture, and how the culture is getting the impact of the language, how the language is entering a certain culture and maybe changing the language of that culture. So language, moving on, we see language is invented to communicate and express a culture. Now, what a beautiful term this is, what a beautiful term, invent. So language has been invented, a viewpoint, language has been invented to communicate and express a culture. So a language not only talks about so many other things, but it also talks about the culture. The whole culture can be pictured in language. You study language of a culture, you come to know about the features of that culture. You come to know about the different types of traditions, you come to know about the different terms that are used in that culture, and that would of course give us an insight into their beliefs, an insight into their feelings, thoughts and emotions, how they behave towards certain things, what are their feelings about certain phenomena, like natural phenomena, what are their thoughts, what are their beliefs. So all that can be studied if you study the language of that culture. So the language begins to determine the way we think and see the world. Same as the view, what viewpoint we have about the world, how we think, what is the world, what is the origin of the world, how is this world changing, why are certain phenomena, natural phenomena occurring in this world. All this we start communicating about. When we talk about those phenomena, when we explore into the natural phenomena, when we explore into the everyday life, like we talk about these ceremonies, so what is the opinion of that people living in that culture, that all that can be seen through language, because they'll be using those words to express their feelings, they'll be using different words to talk about those natural phenomena. So all that comes into language, and that will be communicated further, that will be spread in communication, disseminated, and the language will keep on getting new words, and the language will keep on getting new ideas and new words and new vocabulary. So that would portray what a culture is, that would portray the different features of that culture. Okay, now we cannot go beyond this language. It is a very means by which we understand and think about the world. Language gives us a way to understand and think about the world. So one of the most beautiful way to study the world is through language, because language gives us a picture of the cultures. It gives us the picture of societies. So in the societies and in the cultures you have people. So people, when they talk about the world, when they have build up opinions about the world, when they give different new ideas about the world, when they give inventions and new inventions, when they talk about the discoveries, all that is communicated, is disseminated. So when it is communicated and disseminated, you can understand the world. The whole world can be understood through the communication. It's because man is expressing whatever is inside the mind, whatever is inside that person, inside a man, is coming out in the shape of language. It's coming out in the shape of language, using the medium of communication, or using the medium of language. Man is communicating whatever thoughts and ideas or feelings he has or she has. So that will give us a very good way to study the world. The above idea was basically given by linguist B.L. Wolff. Wolff gave hypothesis: we dissect nature along the lines laid by our native language. So we dissect the nature, we explore the nature, we study nature along the lines given by our native language, because it's a native language that you are the nearest to. So the native language, by using native language, by studying native language, we can study the nature, because that is the most convenient way, and that is the nearest to a person. The first language that a child learns is the mother tongue, and then he moves on to, a child moves on to, and interacts with the people of his own culture, people of his own society. So that is the best way a child can learn, a person can learn about the nature, about different phenomena of nature, because that language is most exposed to. So when we study that language, when we come to know about the nature, we come to know about so many other things happening outside, because that very native language the person is nearest to and has the maximum knowledge of that language. So a person can dissect nature, explore, go into the study of nature, know the secrets even through the study of native language. Now this debate basically is still on, but it's true to some extent that we see the world according to the terms specified by our own language. The debate is still on that how we can how the nature can be studied, or what is the relationship between the nature and language. But to some extent, the linguists, the sociologists, they agree that we can see the world according to the terms specified by our own language. Our own language has those terms which are which have been coined, which have been used for the different phenomena of nature, different natural processes, different events in the, or things going on around us in the society. So we can study nature, we can study the society, we can study the natural phenomena going on around us through our own language. These aspects still being discussed by anthropological linguistics, linguists, philosophers of language, and ethnographers. Now these aspects, this debate is still going on. How a culture can be studied through language, and how language, what is the exact relationship of language with the culture, and how the cultures form up by the spread of languages, and how you can go into the nature or go into the cultures by the study of language. Now, we coming on to the next branch of linguistics, that is the literary stylistics, the study of the style of literary texts. Now, when we analyze the literary texts, we again use linguistics. So we can say that linguistics, it's surprisingly, has touched literature to such an extent that we need the support of linguistics to talk about the beauty of literary text, and even the beauty of poetry, the beauty of prose. We need the support of linguistics. So let's see how linguistics has spread its knowledge into this field, taking the view of register, language used in different fields, religious sermons, sports commentary, law. We can study the styles of the literary texts. So you have different kinds of texts in religious sermons, you have different texts in sports commentary, you have different language in law, you have different language in business, you have different language in the field of medical. So every field again has its specific jargon or specific vocabulary, specific language, and when you look at that, we can study the styles of that language. We can study how language has changed and what changes language has undergone, moving across the domains or across the different domains of knowledge. So now, we may describe its features at the level of phonology, syntax, lexis, and so many other levels of language. So when we are analyzing a literary text, we not only look at the style, but we look at the phonology being used, we look at the syntax, the structure of language, we look at the words being used in different fields, so different varieties of language are being used in different fields. So we basically analyze the text, we analyze a literary text being written or being used for any field, by applying the rules of linguistics, by looking at the phonology, by looking at the words, by looking at the structure of sentences, the formation of sentences, by looking at different words. All these things, they come into play when you are studying a literary text, when you are looking at the quality of a literary text, when you later on talk about the specific features of that literary text. So linguistics here has extended into literature as well, and is giving us a useful support to study the literary text. And through the study of literary text, we can also talk about the literary writers or the styles of the literary writers. So how much you can imagine linguistics has extended into different fields. Now, we distinguish one text from the other. We can distinguish one text from the other by the use of linguistic devices, by studying the linguistic devices, by studying the rules, by applying the rules of linguistics. We can study one text and we can compare it with another text, that which text has certain devices being used in excess and which text has used certain other devices. So this also gives us an insight into the styles of different literary writers. We appreciate how it achieves some special features and effects through the use of language. Now sometimes some literary writers, they apply the different devices in a different way. They even violate the rules of grammar. They coin new words. They apply the devices like similes, metaphors, and then they also sometimes apply the technique of repetition in order to create the musical effect in their poetry. So we appreciate how through the use of linguistics, literature can gain certain, literature can be given certain, can be assigned, certain features can be assigned to literature, or certain qualities can be assigned to literary pieces through the use of, by studying the linguistic devices being applied. The kind of study is termed as literary stylistics. Now this study is basically termed as literary stylistics, and we see how linguistics has extended into this field. Literary writers use a system of language in their own way. By deliberate choice out of the whole range of words, they choose one which is effective. They have so many words at their disposal, and they look at those words and then they choose the right, the appropriate words in different contexts, because they need to create effect, they need to create the beauty, they need to create the musical impact, effect sometimes in their literary text. They need to make it effective. They need to convince the readers. So for that, they need to use different words. They need to use such suitable words which would create the musical effect, which would convince the audience, the readers. So this is basically the use of linguistics, where the literary writers are choosing the right words, they are choosing the right kind of language for different literary texts, or for writing books for different fields. So by their deliberate choice, they are deliberately choosing the words, because they know which words are appropriate in different in which situations. Some techniques used are deviating. Now look at some of the techniques that the literary writers are using. They are deviating from or violation of the rules of grammar. They are even deviating from the rules of grammar. They are changing, they are violating the rules of grammar. For example, you can see in Cummings' poem, he danced his did. Now, from the surface we see that this line doesn't have really very apparent meaning, but yes, Cummings applied it, and he violated the rules of grammar to express his viewpoint. He danced his did. No, he meant that whatever the person wished, he expressed in his action. So he used the word did here. The word did had a different meaning with Cummings when he was using it in this line. Now, looking at some more techniques of poets, inverting the normal order of words in a sentence. Home is a sailor. Again, there is no surface meaning, but here again the word home means something else here, and the writer wants to express something else, not the surface meaning. He means something else. So he is basically changing the normal order of words, or the syntax, or the arrangement of words to create impact, to create musical effect sometimes. So here we see a new technique, that is the words are changed, the orders are changed in order to make literary lines, in order to make the poetry, or in order to make the prose effective. Creating a pattern by repeating some items. For example, the sound F in furrow followed free. You can see the repetition of the sound F. Furrow followed free. To create music, to create beauty, to create harmony, to create a rhythm. Here the poet is repeating the sounds. So poets have at in their control words, sound, syntax. they have, which is called a poetic license. They have the poetic license. For example, in case of poets, it's said that they have a poetic license to coin words. They play with the language, they play with the words, they play with the order, and that is how they create impact in their writings. So the study of the use of language in order to create impact in literature, in the study of use of language in literature to analyze the literary text, we call it stylistics. By such techniques, they basically manipulate language. They play with language. They manipulate language to convey themes forcefully and effectively. The writers, they need to convey their ideas effectively and forcefully in order to get the response from the society. So they need to use specific words. They need to use very suitable words in order to create impact. Now, in stylistic text, we see that in stylistics, the text read carefully with attention to the features of language used. Texts are read very carefully. When you are analyzing certain texts, you need to read them carefully, because you are reading not only the lines, but you are reading between the lines, you are reading the sounds, you are looking at the sounds, you are looking at the sound repetition, you are looking at the repetition of words, you are looking at the word order, you are looking at the use of different devices like similes, metaphors, you are looking at different techniques, poetic techniques or linguistic techniques being applied at different places. So here the texts have to be read very carefully, because you need to analyze the text from every aspect, from every level. You don't only talk about the language, but you talk about so many things, so many features of language, like the phonetics, or you need to syntax, and looking at the order of the words, order of the sentences, the sounds, the repetition of sounds. So you are basically studying the text from different techniques, from different angles. So when you're studying from different angles, you're basically studying the use of linguistics, use of language to analyze literature. Particular features identified and listed under the headings of lexis, grammar, phonology, and sound patterns. This is what we mean by different aspects, by different levels. You study a text, you make a list or you make different lists under different headings of lexis, grammar, phonology, sound patterns, syntax. You make different columns, you make different lists of different things, and then you can of course talk about the quality of text, talk about the language of text, talk about the impact of that text, and what the poet wants to say, or what the poet means by using certain words, or how the poet is creating impact through the use of all these techniques. After getting details, what we do, they are correlated or brought together for interpreting a text. Now, when you have made different lists, they are brought together, they are correlated with each other. You see how the words, they are creating impact on the other words, how the sentences are creating impact on the other sentences, and the overall effect of that text is brought out through the use of individual use of linguistic terms. So it's not only one aspect. You study literary text from different angles and different aspects, and then only you can give an interpretation of a text. The writers try to link what is being said with how it is being said. So they try to establish a link between what the writer wants to say and how the writer is saying it. What was the underlying thought, what was in the mind of the writer, and in order to communicate it, in order to bring it out effectively, what techniques a writer used, what linguistic techniques a writer used, which devices the writer used, which parts of speech the writer used, which lines the writer used in order to create impact. So the writers, they try to link, they try to establish that link between what is being said, what the writer is saying with how he is saying. It is through the letter that writers can fully convey their complex ideas and feelings. Definitely, you see that the writers, they can convey their feelings and thoughts through the devices, through using the use of devices, through the use of effective language, through the use of the appropriate words and sentences. That is how the writers can convey their feelings. That is how the writers can sometimes even convey their complex ideas in a very smooth or very fluent way, in a beautiful way. They can convey those ideas, and sometimes they make very complex ideas sound very easy, and very difficult ideas or complex ideas of ideas of difficult of a high difficulty level, they through the application of different techniques of language, through the application of different devices of language, they make these ideas very easy for the readers. Stylistic analysis also helps in better understanding of how metaphor, irony. Now this is what I was talking about, the techniques, the devices, metaphor, irony, paradox, ambiguity, operate in literary texts. They are effects of language and building up of a coherent linguistic structure. So what are the effects of language? There are different devices. Language conveys its effects through different devices, through metaphors, through irony, through paradox, through ambiguity. By using these, through these, we can see the impact of words. We can see the impact of language. So language comes out. You have assigned different terms. You have assigned different words, or you have assigned different techniques to different kinds of feelings or different kinds of thoughts or the underlying ideas in the minds of the writers. And it is here that when they use these techniques, they use these words, we can come to know their ideas, we can come to know about their feelings, about what they want to say, and what they are saying through what techniques they are trying to communicate to the people. These are basically the effects of language, and they are collectively basically building up a coherent linguistic structure. A linguistic structure is a combination of all these: the irony, the metaphors, the similes, the paradox. These are different devices, linguistic devices, which are basically combined. They combine to, and they make the unified or coherent linguistic structure. Now, coming on to the next branch of linguistics, we see it's neurolinguistics. And as the word is self-explanatory, the term neuro means, of course, related to brain. So we see the role of language now in the brain, in the thought process. So neurolinguistics is basically, let's look at the definition. Neurolinguistics is a study of the neural mechanisms in the human brain that control the comprehension, production, and acquisition of language. So here we see the control, the human brain control, or the control, the different processes of speech, uttering words, and thought process, and listening to words, reacting to that. All that is going on in the brain, and we see the role of language, the role of linguistics in all these processes. As an interdisciplinary field, neurolinguistics draws methodology and theory from the fields such as, you have different fields where the neurolinguistics is taking support from all these fields, like neuroscience, linguistics, cognitive sciences, neurobiology, communication disorders, neuropsychology, and computer sciences. So it is an interdisciplinary field. It has entered different fields. It is overlapping in different fields of knowledge. And neurolinguistics, basically, the techniques are taken from different fields, and they are applied in the neurolinguistics to sort out the problems of human brain, the problems related with human brain, the problems related with speech, for example, the problems related with the hearing ability, the problems related with the speaking ability of people. So the use of language has again created an impact on the thought processes. Linguists study the physiological mechanisms by which the brain processes information related to language and evaluate linguistic and psycholinguistics theories using physiology, brain imaging, electrophysiology and computer modeling. So using all these different branches of knowledge, the psycholinguistics theories, they evaluate neurolinguistics, they evaluate linguistic and psycholinguistics. By the use of these theories, what the neurolinguists are doing, they are basically studying the physiological mechanisms by which the brain processes information. What is actually going on inside the human brain? How the thought is processed? How language is created according to thought? How different words are uttered to convey a certain meaning in a mind? All this comes in under the study of neurolinguistics. And where are they taking support from? They are taking support from all the different branches like psycholinguistics, physiology, brain imaging. Through the use of all these techniques, the linguists are basically trying to establish a link between the language and the thought processes or the processes going on in the brain. Now, one of the first people basically to draw a connection between a particular brain area and language processing was Paul Broca, a French surgeon. Now, he is the person who said that basically the speech, particular brain language is being processed in the front area of the brain, the frontal area, the frontal part of the brain, and it's even if there is some damage to other area, the ability to process language and the ability to utter language, to utter different words is not affected. Now, he conducted autopsies on numerous individuals who had speaking deficiencies and found that most of them had brain damage or lesions on the left frontal lobe in an area now known as Broca area. So left frontal lobe is the place where language is processed. And if that is people who had speech problems, Broca, he examined them, Broca, he studied those people, and he came to know that it's basically the left frontal lobe of a brain that is related with language processing. So all these people who had language problems, their left frontal lobe was damaged, and now this area was given the name of Broca's area. Broca's research possibly the first one to offer empirical evidence. Now, there were studies before that. Many people, many linguists, they had psychologists and linguists, they had mentioned about this frontal area of the brain. They said that, well, yes, language is processed in the left frontal part of the brain. But in fact, it was Broca first time who provided us an empirical evidence for such relationship, and it has been described as epoch-making in pivotal to the fields of neurolinguistics and cognitive sciences. So his basically research study enjoys the pivotal position. His study enjoys the central importance because it was Broca first time who really provided the empirical evidence, who collected data, and he conducted an empirical study, and he gave us the empirical evidence how language is processed in the frontal left lobe. So his people say that people have given the prime importance to Broca's study in this area. There was another man later called Wernicke, after whom Wernicke's area is named. Now, what did he do? He proposed that different areas of brain were specialized for different linguistic tasks. This is very natural. People know now that brain is processing brain is undergoing different processes in the process of in the thought process. So brain processes a part of the brain processes speech. Part of the brain is responsible for the utterance of words. A part of brain is responsible for comprehension of these words and processing the appropriate language according to the thought. So different areas. It was Carl Wernicke who basically brought out that you have different areas in the brain which are specialized for different tasks, and Broca's area is specialized at handling the motor production of speech, and Wernicke's area handling the auditory speech. Now here we have the different speech comprehension. Now here we have the differentiation. Again, inside the brain, it's not only the Broca's area which is doing everything. Broca's area and Wernicke's area, two separate areas, two different areas. One of the areas, the Broca's area, responsible for handling the motor production of speech. Speech is produced there. And the other area, which was later given name as Wernicke's area, is basically handling auditory area of the speech. The auditory, how the sounds are heard, and how the sounds are processed, and how they are comprehended. So there are two separate areas handling the one process of speech. Whether one is the uttering speech, and the other hearing certain words and hearing sounds and words and then processing them according to the situation. So two different areas are working and doing the same activity. Broca and Wernicke, their work on physiology is very important, enjoys the prime importance. Now, the established idea of language study through the study of physical characteristics of brain, and we see that neurolinguistics is basically, it's the established idea of language study through the study of physical characteristics of brain. So you study the physical characteristics of brain, the role of the different areas of brain in the speech, and you can study the speech deficiencies, the speech problems, even the problems related with speaking, the problems related with hearing and comprehending and responding to language. They are giving us they have given us a separate field, which is the neurolinguistics. The coining of the term neurolinguistics attributed to Harry Whittaker, who founded the Journal of Now again we have another idea here. We have another important point here. The coining of the term neurolinguistics, it was attributed to Harry Whittaker, who founded the Journal of Neurolinguistics in 1985. So this term is related. This term has come from Harry Whittaker. Neurolinguistics as a discipline. Now, so far we have talked about the role of linguistics, in the thought processes, in processing a thought in the brain and in the utterance of sounds or utterance of speech. But what is neurolinguistics when it is taken as a discipline? Neurolinguistics closely related to the field of psycholinguistics. Psycholinguistics, again, since it's the study of language and brain, so neurolinguistics again is a study of the thought processes or the processes going on the brain, inside the brain. So these two fields are closely related, and many ideas are overlapping in these two fields of psycholinguistics and neurolinguistics. Much work in neurolinguistics involves testing and evaluating theories put forth by psycholinguistics and theoretical linguistics. So here we see that neurolinguistics basically is testing, experimenting all the theories being given by psycholinguistics and theoretical linguistics. So theories are coming from psycholinguists and theoretical linguists, and practical aspect, neurolinguistics is putting them into practical use, using them practically to solve the problems of people, to solve the speech problems of people who have problems of speech. In general, theoretical linguists propose models to explain the structure of language and how language information is organized. So what is theoretical linguists doing? They are just studying the models of language, looking at the structure of language, and how the language information is organized. Whereas psycholinguists propose models and algorithms to explain how language information is processed in the mind. So psycholinguists, they talk about the different models. They give the different models and algorithms to explain, the formulas, the rules, to explain how language information is processed in the brain, how the words, they are transformed into thought, how they are comprehended by the brain, and how they are conveyed, how a thought process is there in the brain, and how that process converts the ideas into words, and how those words are uttered later. So it's the area of related to psycholinguistics. Now, the neurolinguistics basically analyze brain activity to infer how biological structures like populations and networks of neurons carry out those psycholinguistic processing algorithms. So it's basically, they give the psycholinguistics, they give the theories, they give the formulas, they give the ideas, they give the rules, and neurolinguistics basically, they look at the physical aspect, how brain takes those rules, takes those algos, and converts them into meaningful thoughts, and converts them into meaningful ideas to be conveyed later. So this is the difference. There is a relation as well between the psycholinguistics and neurolinguistics, since both of them are involved with the study of brain, the brain processes. But there's a slight difference as well. The psycholinguistics, they're basically giving talking about the theoretical aspects, and the neurolinguistics are talking about the use of those theoretical theories for their use of those theories to process the different ideas. Now, neurolinguistics research is carried out in all the major areas of linguistics. It has spread so much that neurolinguistics now has touched different areas, different major areas of linguistics, and the main linguistic subfields and how neurolinguistics addresses them are given in the table that follows. Now, we have a very interesting table coming up which talks about the thought processes, which talks about the different subfields, the description, research questions in neurolinguistics. Now, if we look at phonetics, it's a study of speech sound. That is how phonetics is described. Now, research questions in neurolinguistics, how the brain extracts speech sounds from acoustic signals, how the brain separates speech sounds from background noise. So this is related with phonetics. The neurolinguistics has taken support from phonetics, the study of speech, which is the study of speech sounds, and the neurolinguists, what they do, they use that theory, the theories of phonetics, and they see how the brain, it extracts speech sounds from acoustic signals. There is a difference between speech sound and signal. So how the brain separates them, and how the brain how the speech sounds from the background noise. Now, there will be what is basically the meaningful part and what is the meaningless part. What is the noise and what is the meaningful part of the speech coming, or the sounds entering the brain. This is the concern of neurolinguists. Then, moving on to phonology. When we look at phonology, the study of how sounds are organized in a language. And what are the neurolinguists doing? How they look at how the phonological system of a particular language is represented in the brain. The phonological system, what is its role and how it is portrayed in the brain, what type of system or what type of arrangement of sounds that is there in the brain, and how is it processed, and what is the role it's playing, and how it is interpreted, and how it is used later. Moving on to the next branch, which is morphology and lexicology. The study of how words are structured and stored in the mental lexicon. Now, what are the neurolinguists doing using the theories coming from morphology and lexicology? They look at how the brain stores and accesses words that a person knows. How the brain stores the words already present or the new words coming, how the words are retained inside the brain, and how some of the words they're gone, how some of the words they are forgotten or they are lost. So neurolinguists again here are taking morphology and lexicology and taking support from there and looking at how the brain is receiving the morphemes, how the brain is receiving certain sounds, and how the brain is processing them, how the brain is retaining them. Syntax, the study of how multiple word utterances are constructed, how the brain combines words into constituents and sentences, how structural and semantic information is used in understanding sentences. So again, syntax and semantics together. We see what is semantics, the study of how meaning is encoded in language. So what are the linguists, linguists doing? They are looking at how the brain combines the words into constituents and sentences, because sometimes the words, you of course join the words, you arrange the words to design a sentence, to form a sentence. So that process of the going on in the brain, where certain words are arranged in a particular fashion to convey the meaning, or in the right correct way or correct order to convey the meaning, that is the area which the neurolinguists are studying, taking the help or taking syntax and semantics into consideration. So how the brain combines, looking at, I would like you to look at it again, how the brain combines words into constituents and sentences, how structural and semantic information is used in understanding sentences. Because again, you need some semantic information and structural information to design, to form sentences, to understand the sounds, to understand the role of the words in certain sentences, like verbs and nouns and adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, articles. They have a certain role to play, and they can be interpreted clearly if they are put at the right place in certain sentences. Like somebody uttering a positive or affirmative sentences has to use these words in different fashion, but somebody speaking a negative sentence or maybe asking a question again has to rearrange these sentences. So where is this done? It is done inside the brain. So there is a whole thought process going on to take the signals, to process them, to separate the words which are not important, to separate the noise from the meaningful words, and again to arrange those words and to arrange those words to form sentences, to communicate, to utter those sentences in order to convey the feelings or the thoughts. All this is basically the area of concern for neurolinguists, and they are taking the support, they are taking into picture different fields of linguistics like phonetics, phonology. They are also taking into consideration morphology, lexicology. So all the subfields of linguistics, they are being utilized by the neurolinguists, and they are designing research, and they are trying to solve different queries. They are trying to answer different questions related with the processes going on in the brain. Now, coming on to the summary of today's talk, we talked about the anthropological linguistics, and we see that the evolution of language in human society and its role in the formation of culture. What is anthropological linguistics? It basically talks about the culture, it talks about the relation of language with culture, the effect, the impact of language on culture, and how we can study a culture, particular culture, through the study of language, how a language portrays culture, how a language portrays human society, and the role, evolution of language, how the language is changed in human society. Sometimes you find changes and variations in language moving across the various sections of society, and the role of language in the formation of culture, how languages they form culture, how languages they change cultures, what is the impact of languages on the pictures, different pictures or different situations that we see in different cultures. Then we talked about the literary stylistics, the study of the style of literary text. We see we appreciate we write critical appreciations of literary texts. We study the pieces of poetry. We study the pieces of prose. All that we study using the linguistics, taking support from linguistics. We study how different texts can be separated from each other. We study the features of text. We study how linguistic devices like similes, like metaphors, they are, or alliteration that is used in the process of creating beauty or creating impact of in the literary text. We see how these devices, they give an idea about the style of the literary writers, because sometimes the styles are related with the literary writers, and most of the literary writers, they are known for their specific styles. So we see again that to study literature, to appreciate the literary pieces, to talk about the specific features of poetry or prose, again we study the we apply the techniques of linguistics. We see the different devices, the linguistic devices being used in the in writing the literary text, and study of those linguistic devices gives us an idea about literature. So we see the link between linguistics and literature in literary stylistics. Then we talked about the neurolinguistics, the study of the neural mechanisms in the human brain that control the comprehension, production, and acquisition of language. Here we see the relationship between between neurolinguistics and psycholinguistics. Now, psycholinguistics related with psychology, again giving us theories related to the processes going on in the brain, giving us the processes which furnish the information to brains, and the processes which are involved in the processing of thoughts and again assisting the brain to convert them into meaningful shapes, and then helping the brain in uttering the meaningful sentences. Psycholinguistics just is providing theories in all that, and neurolinguists are taking the support of those theories and studying the physical features of brain, studying the neurons, studying the physical makeup of a brain, and how and they're looking at how these specific physical features of the brain are processing information, and are using these theories in order to process the thoughts, process the ideas inside the brain, and assisting the brain in the production of speech. Again, we see that neurolinguistics is also useful in the medical sciences, where people who have speech problems, they again go to the speech therapist, and speech therapists in turn again take the help from neurolinguistic, the field of neurolinguistics, and they sort out the problems, and they again help these patients in removing these speech problems. They have specific techniques, they have specific words, they have some special sounds, and which they make the patients utter those sounds and utter those speech, and they have special techniques which can help these patients. So we see, broadly speaking, we see that today, in today's lecture, we see that that linguistics has not only touched some other fields, which the psychology, the sociology, the economics, or the law. We see some more fields today. We talked about the anthropological, where they have linguistics has touched the culture, it has touched the literature, it has touched the mental processes, or the aspects related to mind. So in the coming lecture, we'll move on to the further ideas or further theories that came up related to linguistics. Till then, it's Khuda Hafiz. That's all we have for this lecture.